So, welcome again to another edition of the Influence Global podcast. And I'm delighted to have with me a very special guest in the form of Mark Adams. And he's the CEO and founder of Blinding Talent, which is, well, actually, Mark, lovely to have you on the show. Why don't you tell us what you do? Because you've got, for those watching on video, Mark's got this amazing background of awards, I guess, of different artists that you work with, or are those personal to you?
Yeah, thank you, Gordon. Yeah, thanks for having me on here. Very, very pleased to be here. I'm Mark Adams, CEO and founder of Blind Talent, and yeah, I've got a fairly interesting background, a few trinkets, let's just say, from years gone by. I've actually got an awful lot more of these discs at home as well, which, much to my wife's recoil sometimes, because where do they go? Where do you put them? Unfortunately, when you've been in a fairly senior industry position for over 20 years,
Mm.
you kind of get sent a lot of discs, and it's really lovely and incredibly sweet. They're not all 50 Cent and James Blunt, I can assure you that. Some of them are very much artists that you wouldn't want to necessarily display, but yet still sold an awful lot of records.
Yeah.
Let's not even get started on DJ Otzi, eh? But no, very, very grateful to be here, and thanks for having me on.
No, great. And a little bit of background about yourself, because you worked for some major labels and brands before you started your own music agency, talent agency, didn't you?
I did, yeah. I've been very lucky. I'll try and give you the short version of my career, which is often quite difficult for me to do as sort of mid-40s guy, right? And I've been in the industry over 27 years now. So yeah, so the context here. So I kind of come from South London, fairly modest background, dreams of working in music. Never really thought it would ever happen, if I'm brutally honest. My dad was a labourer, my mum was a housewife. I used to sit there and watch the box music television endlessly. Like, so music videos were just an absolute outlet for me.
Mm.
And I love music more than anything. It kind of gave me an amazing escapism. And so that context is important, especially the box part, because in the mid 90s, it was, the number one channel. It was breaking artists like Spice Girls and Britney Spears and Take That. They were very much born out of the box. It wasn't MTV back then breaking those bands, it was the box. And I was incredibly grateful for that, because I was discovering completely mad genres of music. And I already had a very eclectic taste anyway. I grew up listening to everything from Motown to two-tone to rap to, Bros and pop music. And
My
Tiffany was the
goodness.
first record I ever bought, So I listened to some fantastic music, but a very eclectic taste. So in the mid 90s, I carried on watching, and I was at college, and I just kept thinking, oh, wouldn't it be great one day? Oh, it would never happen. I was actually oddly ready to kind of move on and move into teaching, which is, when I think about that, it's pretty bad that my journey went from I'm going to become a primary school teacher to where I ended up. But in 1997, I was afforded the chance to work at the box. So got an amazing opportunity to work Friday and Saturday nights. So I lost all my social life and become a broadcast engineer, which is which sounds like a really boring job, and maybe not a very creative job. But actually, my job was, and this was in my exact job, to watch the TV channels. That was my job. And
Really?
if anything goes wrong, call an engineer to come and fix them. That was my entire job, end to end, and I got paid for that. So I was living the absolute dream. I was working Friday and Saturday nights, so maybe there was a bit of a sacrifice there from my social life. But I got to do what I do anyway, which is just watch music video. And it was an utter privilege. And at that point, I decided, well, look, I don't want to do anything else in my life. So I'll just stay in this job until someone kicks me out. And I went through college, and I got into university. I was about to become a teacher. And, I still had this part-time job. And I was like, I'm not going to leave. And then in 2000, I got given the opportunity to join the music team at the box. And it was an absolute dream come true, an absolute dream come true. And then really the journey properly started, because at that point we was just moving. There was a more of a technical switch at this point from analog
Mm.
broadcast into digital. That's really important, because I think in your context as someone who's really, we talk about influencers and influencer marketing and all of these technological platforms that exist now to facilitate influencers and audiences of such. They were born out of this exact switch, moving from analog, and I'm talking tape players, CD players, into an entire TV station being put into a little box like this.
Mm.
Crazy. And so because of that, we had the channel called The Box, which everyone will be quite familiar with if you're of a certain age, probably less so the younger people these days. But we had a jukebox station, and it was, people don't know this actually, there were 60 different versions of it across the UK. So if
Really?
you're watching The Box in different areas, you'd be watching a different channel. So it'd be the same brand, so it'd say The Box Music Television You Control. But if you're in Sheffield, you'd be watching a very different TV channel to if you were in London. A
Wow.
lot of people don't know that.
No,
And
no.
once you think about it, it was really quite special because it meant that people's interpretation of The Box differed depending on what region you went to, because it would be more biased to what people were selecting.
Mm.
So in Glasgow, it was a big hip hop area at the time. People would just think The Box was a hip hop channel. In London, again, there was 4 different stations in London. There was a South London station, a North London station, East and West. People don't realize that. So every experience was slightly different. But anyway, cut a long story short, we moved from analog to digital, and we actually consolidated all of the regional stations into one national TV station called The Box. That was significant because that enabled us to restructure the entire. But now I say we, obviously I was very junior at this time, but I was just involved in the massive change, and it was a complete shift away from this really traditional, archaic, tape-based TV channels. It was very archaic. Moved very quickly into this a computer, a TV in a computer, like an entire channel in a TV, like in just a little box. It was crazy. What that enabled us to do was be quite on the front foot in terms of tech. And we went from launching 1 TV station to 7 within a year. And those brands were really powerful brands. So I was very, very lucky to be part of the launch for Smash Hits, which was more known as a magazine, but we turned it into a TV station. So fantastic pop station launched by Shaggy himself.
Oh my goodness.
Um, but actually, at the time, it's really funny because the box had just been bought by EMAP. Now, EMAP was a big magazine publisher back then who owned Smash Hits, and that's why we were able to take that brand and put it on TV pretty quickly. And you'll see that that relationship between EMAP and the past owners when they bought it was so important because they were able to take their magazine brands and put them onto TV. So these are very influential music brands.
Mm.
And suddenly they were able to take them from print onto TV. Such a significant move. We also shared a floor with Smash Hits magazine. The little people, not many people know this. The box actually shared the floor with Smash Hits magazine for about a year, which was as crazy as you can imagine in the early noughties. It was every pop star walking in every single day. Blue, Atomic Kitten, and if you're of a certain age, you'll remember those artists. If you're not,
Yeah,
you're
I
probably
do.
not.
Yes.
But all of that was really exciting because then we launched Smash Hits, and very quickly we launched Smash Hits, Kiss, Kerrang, Magic, and we was just suddenly a channel went from 1 channel to 6 channels. And then we were in that game of let's compete with MTV. So I was very lucky to be part of the Kerrang TV launch. And in fact, all of the launches, I was part of all of them. I was in the music team. So my job was it was funny being in that situation because I remember it as, oh, you're the young person in the room, like, which is quite funny. When everyone looks around and goes, oh, we need a young person's opinion. And
Yeah,
then they'll point at me and they'll be like, hello,
yeah.
I'm a young
I'm the
person.
token young person, yeah.
Yeah, it was a bit like that. So I'm not giving you the short version of this, I apologize, but I'll kind of skip a few steps here. So that enabled me to start working with some really powerful music brands. And so I got a really sharp appreciation of, well, how you manage a brand and how you understand the brand and how you visualize a brand, how even getting the right voiceover to talk about the brand and the copy and the scripting.
Mm.
And I was very curious. I was always into speaking to the producers and the creators and going, well, how do you do that? And why are you thinking like that? And why would you choose that color over that color? And why is this, promo sting only 3 seconds? It sounds like that could go on a bit longer. And why do you use it in? I was asking lots of questions, and that's just the kind of person I was and still am.
Mm.
And curiosity becomes quite a big part of my story, actually, Gordon, because curiosity leads to quite a lot of opportunity in my career. And so we launched all these channels, and then suddenly we were taken on MTV. MTV had like 7 channels. It had MTV Hits, MTV Dance, MTV Base, MTV2, MTV Main Channel. There was VH1. They had this huge network of channels. And here was us, the underdogs, and we were really the underdogs. And that's how it was played internally as a business too. We were the underdogs.
Mm.
Now, of course, when you're in a position of less budget, you're the underdog, it affords you the opportunity to be way more creative, which I absolutely thrived in. So I was part of the music team with some really fantastic programmers at the time called Simon Sadler, David Young, Lee Thompson, who still writes a record of the day. Simon Sadler, I still think he's involved in music television to a small degree too. And so what is amazing, but I was just learning from these absolute beasts in media. But creativity really was the lifeblood of the business. And it was something that EMAP back then used as a business slogan. They used to say, creativity is the lifeblood of the business.
Mm.
Roughly translated, we haven't got a lot of money. So please be as creative as possible. And so I really thrived in that environment. I learned an awful lot. And in 2005, the head of music at the time was moving on. Now I'd kind of come up through the ranks pretty aggressively, right? I was like, like a dog of a bone. And he was leaving and they were actually going to employ externally. They didn't even look at me for that job. And I was like, no, 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 come on, just give me a shot. And they were like, okay, while we're looking to employ externally, we'll give you the role as acting head of music. And of course, typical me, took it with both hands. But that's when the innovation started. And that's where my curiosity really became important, because I started to introduce A lists, B lists, charts, lists of music like listicles, top 100 power ballads, top 100 love songs. People hadn't really done this before in television. Certainly, it was all just very much, here's some videos that you might like.
Yeah.
Whereas I started to create and narrate them. I also changed the music policy right away across the business. And fair play to Simon Sadler at the time, my actual big boss, he gave me the license to do that. And within 6 months, we were the #1 music TV network. Now,
Wow.
that's really cool, because that led to Channel 4 looking at us more seriously as an acquisition. So they were just getting, I think they were just down in tools on T4, which was like the Saturday youth orientated programming. They looked at our network and was like, well, hold on, we can buy into this. And so that's what happened. So EMAP sold half of it to Bauer, which are more of a German known magazine and radio network,
Yeah.
and half of it to Channel 4. Channel 4 took us over, and we had a Freeview channel called The Hits. And I should have mentioned this earlier, actually, which was very powerful. That was another moment in TV history, certainly, where Freeview was this huge opportunity. People could access multiple channels for free. So you went from having 4 channels to 35 channels, and it cost you nothing. And we had a music TV channel on there called The Hits. And Channel 4 obviously saw that as a great opportunity to change that to 4 Music, which is what they did. So we went from this really influential network and we were breaking artists left, right, and center. Some of them behind me, whether it be Jack Johnson, 50 Cent, take that when they reincarnated Beyonce. We were super involved in Aguilera and Timberlake, Ed Sheeran. I mean, that's when we get a little bit further down the line, but we were breaking artists. We were actually breaking artists, and I was very much a part of that. And so Channel 4 come in, the whole business changed. We went from this underdog, maverick, really cool brand to Channel 4. Right, now you're a business. Now you're like an actual TV station. And it was quite a gear shift, actually. We started to move into long form programming. We started to move into documentaries. But that's also when I started to get curious about things like Spotify and YouTube, even before it really been a thing. Now, YouTube obviously launched in 2006, but no one had thought to partner with them. So I started doing that. I started getting involved in the Spotify partnership in 2013. People often think Spotify invented playlisting. I can assure you they did not invent playlisting. It just feels that way sometimes. And so I've done some really groundbreaking stuff. I won a couple of awards for Bauer Incubator Program, where I launched an artist called Neon Jungle, a couple of top 10 records. That was really great fun, but gave me a real insight to the labels. And as I come through my career a bit further on, I started to get involved with brands and McDonald's and KFC, and started to blend music programming with those brands. So Ed Sheeran's a great example of that.
Okay.
So Ed Sheeran's first ever TV performance was on a show called KFC Crush'ems, which was a branded show, and they were looking for performances. I'd already come across Ed Sheeran, a number of things he'd done with SBTV and Atlantic Records. I was like, well, definitely let's get him on. And he'd done the A Team, and that was his first ever performance. So that's something that I can take away and say that was genuinely his first ever TV performance was on our show,
Mm.
KFC Crush'ems. And by the way, it was called The Crush, and the reason for that is because the milkshake KFC was sponsoring was called Crush'ems.
Oh, goodness.
So the show was rather innovatively called The Crush with a K, obviously, because they're crazy like that. But it really started to open my mind to brand activations and marketing and
Mm.
how you can execute marketing in a multifaceted way. And you could bring in presenters to add more character. And those presenter choices were really important because they had to match the brand values of the sponsor as well
Right.
as the show. So you
Absolutely.
start to have to bring in all of these different thought processes that really, as a young, coming from the very beginning of my career, just watching the TV and going, this is great, to actually it takes an awful lot to put a commercial model around TV and understand how brands and how activations all play a role in kind of supporting the business financially, but also presenting it in a really powerful way,
Mm.
impactful way.
Absolutely.
So as I come through all of this, I've obviously been exposed now to global music brands, global marketing campaigns, just unbelievably professional and experienced creative individuals that just think completely differently. So I was absorbed by all of this stuff. I was just like, oh my God, this is incredible. And I become like the director of music programming around 2013, I think 2012. And I just started looking after more people. To be honest with you, director of music programming actually means, again, roughly translated, you're doing less creative stuff now. You're just managing more
People,
people, which
Asian people, yeah.
is probably not exactly my the most exciting thing for me. We then tried a few new things. We tried launching like an app for the box, and honestly, just didn't work. We done a few cool things to try and activate, but the things that worked best were still the partnerships with influential brands like Spotify, YouTube, official charts, radio airplay, Nielsen. These are influencer partnerships. Really, they were the biggest influencers within music, and we presented them on TV. It was really powerful. And then I left there in 2018, and we're slowly getting up to where Blind and Talent is now, by the way. So I apologize, this is about 20 minutes in. But in 2018, I left, and I just started experimenting. I started to work with AI companies. So there's a great company called Feed Forward AI. I was brought in as a consultant there. AI obviously is, right now it's everything, but back then it was still relatively new, and they were just trying to work it. Well, it wasn't new. It was never new. AI is like 100 years old. If you go and read a book called AIQ, you'll understand just how sort of like long tail that idea of AI has been.
Yes.
But Feed Forward AI, I started consulting with them, started doing some consultancy in labels and development companies. Had a really great time just learning. And then after 2 years of bouncing around record labels and having lots of different successes, Blinding Talent was formed. And we do artist development and music marketing, and we work with a range of artists from independent artists right the way through to major label artists. And one of our things is, the thing that we say all the time is our job is to get you closer to the music industry. Whether you're completely new or you've been going a while, but you still haven't quite had that moment,
Yeah.
our job is to bring you closer to the music industry and help you understand the rules of the game. Because the rules of the game are very clear to us because we're in it, we live it, we breathe it. But when you're outside of it, it can feel like you're on the subs bench and you're probably never going to get any minutes on the pitch because
Mm.
you're ready to go. You've done all the training. You're absolutely ready to go, but the manager's never bringing you on. You never quite understand why, So we like to think that we give you that opportunity to get on the pitch and start experiencing what it's like to be in the industry.
Mm.
That gives you an awful lot of confidence and belief to kind of move on to that next level. Some artists really thrive in it. Some artists maybe a bit overwhelmed initially, at least. And then maybe our job is to help them along and kind of put a little arm around them and say, hey, look, come on, we're going to
And
do
you're, and
this.
you're
It's
and you're
really
really helping young undiscovered talent as much as anything else, aren't you? As part of your remit at Blinding Talent, you've had some great successes, I know from talking to you before.
mm,
So what I want to, and well done on the amazing story and back history of what you've done. I think what it does provide a sense of context now and into you now running your own ship and your own team and how that's grown. I've watched with interest over the years to see how that's developed. But hey, the landscape has changed a lot more now, hasn't it? I mean, goodness me, once upon a time, an individual couldn't ever get anywhere unless they were on radio or whatever. But now you've got people that are literally blowing up on TikTok or YouTube because that's the way they're growing their fan base. But equally, there's some of these people need a lot of help in carving out their niche and their brand identity. And I think that's where you and your team really do a great job. Just fill us in on what that process looks like.
Yeah, certainly. And you're right. I think we get an awful lot of joy working with independent artists, particularly those artists that are very talented and maybe aren't getting the opportunities.
Mm.
Because for us, we see it as it's wasted talent. We often say, that old adage of, if a tree falls down and no one's there to hear it, does it make a sound? And it's so true in an artist world because you have some incredibly talented people that no one's ever heard. And I say often, there's plenty of great music that no one's ever heard, and there's plenty of bad music that's topping the charts.
Yes,
it comes
indeed.
it often comes. I mean, well, not only is that subjective, but I think it often comes down to the strategy that one employs. Sometimes it's
Indeed.
limitations by budget, sometimes it's limitations by creativity or partnerships or understanding. But yeah, for us, artist development, over the years, I've been developing a model, and that model is called the five corner model. And what it does is it enables us to have a sensible framework to go around an artist. So the five corners are music, marketing, well-being, industry, and sustainability. I'll explain a little bit more on each one of those corners. So music is clearly the most important thing. If you've got terrible music, yes, you can repair it to a certain degree. But if you have got great products, because music is your product, again, just to sort of align it to business terminology, which we try to employ for artists all the time. We want to try to make it tangible. I think the music industry doesn't feel tangible. Sometimes it feels like I've got some music, I'll get some streams and I'll become a star. Is that how it works? It's like, well, no, it's not quite how it works, but it does start like in any good business with your product. What is your product? And so the music corner is all about making sure that you've got great songs produced well, you understand music, maybe it's performance as well. So trying to understand your live performance alongside that. It's all right having a great song, can you pull it off live? Some might say, well, what's the importance of live? Well, let's not get into that today necessarily, but for some artists, it's still very, very, very important. Now, I do think it's a little bit of a moment of truth for a lot of artists, that too. It's okay having a great song that sounds great on Spotify, but will it sound great when you're in a room with 50 people? Who knows? So music, get the music right. Then there's marketing. So marketing is something that I'm very passionate about, but it kind of broadly splits into two areas. So you've got your brand and then your strategy. That's kind of broadly how it fits. And your brand is all about, again, you can get into super detail here, but I liken it to a shop front. I like to talk to artists in a way that they can kind of understand. So if you imagine you're a shop, the way that you look is the outside the shop. That's your logo outside. It's when people look at the shop, is it appealing? What does it say about you? What colors are you using? And then when we talk about the narrative, it's when they come into the shop, what's the environment they're coming into? How does it feel? Which is, again, it's an odd thing to say sometimes. How does your brand feel? But your brand absolutely definitely has a feel to it. There's a very big difference between walking into, Primark and Gucci, quite different experiences. They feel like different experiences. An artist will feel different as well. And look, this stuff, and I'm sure the people who listen to this podcast will understand a lot of this, but our context is that often the brands we're working with, and the artists we're working with, they lack that nuance because they're focused so much on the music, they forget about how it connects to other people. And so you look at the brand and they walk in the shop, and then of course they get to the shelves, and the shelves is your produce, and you've got to have good products on there and the right price points. I suppose there's a bit of a challenge here when you look at Spotify and streaming and how low cost that is. It does mean that you have to look at your product suite in a slightly different way. You're going to have loss leaders, and streaming is pretty much that. So that really sits in the awareness stage and kind of helps people in and introduce them to other products that have got a higher margin. So there's your brand, and then the experience of the brand as they come into the shop and the products that are on the shelves. That's all around marketing. How do you get people into the shop? That there's we call it the heroin dealer trick, which I'm sure you've heard before. But you need to give people stuff. You need to think about acquisition costs.
Mm.
You need to think about how much are you prepared to pay for a fan. It's a really important metric. That's so important. How much
Interesting.
are you prepared to pay for a fan?
Cost per fan. I love that.
Yeah, but then what is the lifetime value of that fan? This
Mm.
is important metrics that when we speak to artists, we say to them, "Look, focus on, and I mean, in the industry now, they're calling it super fans,
Mm. Yeah,
which feels a bit like
correct.
10 years too late, right? But of course, super fans are the only thing that matters because they're just customers. They're just customers, and that's what we try to say to our artists all the time. They are customers. How much will you pay to acquire a customer, and how much is that customer worth to your business over a period of time? Hopefully, it's 10 quid versus £100. That's what you're hoping for, crudely. So
But
that's
just
marketing.
just to interrupt a second, it's a really good point that you made. I mean, you and I both have an interest in the success of people like Taylor Swift, and she has really leveraged the superfan model, hasn't she? Beyond belief. If I wrote about her in my book, actually, in the early years, she spent so much time supporting. She used to be famous for doing 4-hour walkabouts before her event, and she get selfies with people because she realized that user generated content was really going to be the ticket. And of course, we've even got a brand name for the super fans, haven't we? The Swifties. But it's an
Yeah.
interesting concept. I mean, I know we're talking at the higher level here, but I guess what you're saying is if we start to create that at the early stages, what does it look like to be a super fan, and how important that the artist should invest in this process?
100%. And when we talk about marketing, we do think about community as part of that.
Yeah.
And we do think about, I mean, look, the fact that Taylor Swift is just walking around having selfies with people, is that any different standing outside a shopping center and handing out flyers? Is it really any different? You're just acquiring customers. And
Mm,
that's what I think. I mean, I was very lucky to meet Taylor Swift a couple of times, and she was a young person, but with a very old head. And you could see that she'd come through a bit of a machine, and the team around her were very much like, this is a business. You have to work harder than the person next to you.
mm,
And this is, I think, slightly lost in artists these days. I don't think they understand just how hard they have to work to achieve the level of Taylor Swift and Gaga. These artists weren't just sitting on their hands and hoping that everything comes to them. They were out there grinding every day. And
mm.
people don't often think like that. They kind of go, oh, yeah, but it's all well and good. They've got millions of pounds and a big record label team. They didn't at the beginning.
No,
They did
exactly.
not at the beginning.
Yeah.
Go and have a look at Lady Gaga. She was doing open mics. She was hustling hard in that LA scene. So it's an absolute nonsense. Every one of these artists starts from somewhere. Even the artists that are super privileged, you can have as much money as you want in the world. If you're not actually acquiring customers yourself, you'll only get so far. And if your product isn't good enough, it won't last.
Mm,
So in the marketing side, we talk a lot about that. We talk a lot about your brand and your story, and your story is really important. Look, we're in 2024 because of a great book of stories. If ever it's lost on you how powerful a story is, just remember what year we're in and why
mm,
we're in this year. Whether you're religious or not, doesn't matter. Those stories won. So a story is the most important thing. And so when we talk about marketing, that's what we look at. And we go quite deep dive into that area. Then the third part of the arts development is well-being. So this is really in the industry. People don't really look at this area very much. Building resilience, it's no different to owning your own business, whether it's getting regular therapy sessions or meditation or understanding your knowledge gaps, targets, KPIs, just trying to keep yourself motivated and moving forward. It's so underplayed in the industry. We're
mm.
working with young people often. They're creative. They're not natural. They're on that emotional spectrum. They are bouncing from here to here to here to here. And so they need a little bit of a cuddle sometimes.
Of
They
course
need
they
someone to
do.
kind of
Yeah.
just go, it's okay. And it's a really important part of our development, that one-to-one support and coaching. So important. You can probably
Mm.
tell I'm really passionate about what I do, but I think also when I work with artists, I want them to understand just how hard it is. You have to work, but you have to make sure you put time in there to just check in on yourself and just
And
make
also
sure.
manage their expectations as well, Mark, because I think
Definitely.
sometimes if they feel like they've got a great song and their friends are loving it and everything else, why isn't things happening quicker and faster?
Mhm.
So you working with them in terms of a process map so they understand where they are on that journey and what they need to do together. It's so
Mhm.
important, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Success is also very relative. I think Taylor Swift, her level of success would be selling out 50,000 seater stadiums. And,
Mm.
whereas an artist at a certain level, selling out a 50 cap venue is a huge
Of
success.
course it is. Yes.
And I think that's the important part of success is how relative it is, because you can't go from 0 to 1,000 fans overnight. It just doesn't happen. Even if you go viral, I would say that's still walking on very thin ice in terms of an audience. And so it's a journey. And I think well-being and support is something that we take very, very seriously with the artists that we work with, just to ensure that they're moving forward, they're thinking about their brand and their business in the right way. I mean, it is very much like business coaching as well.
Mm.
And I say to people all the time, look, I'm an independent business. I'm pretty much the same as you as an artist. I need to think about the same things as you. I need to be thinking that my product's good. I need to be marketing myself correctly. I need to be taking a bit of self-care here to understand that, look, if I'm burnt out, that will affect my business. So we have to look at it like that. And that's one thing about being a business owner that I really love, is that I do actually have a narrative that is aligned to an artist. Very, very similar. This
Mm.
business started in my spare room in 2020, and now there's 10 of us in the business.
Yeah.
It's because I was in my spare room, and my first question was, is my product any, or my questions were, is my product any good? And where are my customers? Now imagine how powerful that would be for an artist if they were able to just think with that clarity. But I was also very fortunate that I had a business coach, and that my brother is a very exceptional business person, was able to give me that coaching and support when I was kind of being that emotional. Oh my God, how do I do this? I don't know. What's tax? What is that? I don't know. And he was
Yeah.
able to go, it's okay. This
Yeah.
is what you do. This is what success looks like for you. This is fantastic. And I'm going, but I'm not moving quick enough.
Yeah.
No, you've got to take the steps and you're going to see progression. And that was really important for me. So I can see the parallels between my business and an artist, because we're just businesses.
Well, and you're relatable then. And that's a very good point that you've just said there. We're just businesses, because I think a lot of creatives, with all due respect, lack a lot of business acumen, or don't want to be seen to be selling themselves. They almost want the content to do the job for them. But
Mm.
if you've not got enough ears listening to that content, it's not going to happen, is it?
Yeah, and how many years do you need is a really big question too, because people often say, "Oh, I want thousands of fans, I want hundreds of thousands of fans." Great, okay, that's fine. If you've got a product that can scale to that level, fantastic. But the reality is, you might not need that many. Your customer base might not need to be 20,000 to make a full-time career out of this. And so that gets us quite nicely into the next part. And I think kind of what you were saying there. So the fourth part of our model is the industry. How do we connect you to the industry? Now, there's some very obvious things. Simply going to events, networking events, meeting the right people. But I say it's obvious, but for an artist to go to an event and just talk to people, that's not very, you're not setting them up to win, are you? You're kind of setting them up to fail, really. You're saying, hey, go to this event that's got hundreds and hundreds of people in it. Go and say hello to as many people as you can, and just meet people and then make strong connections. Where do you start? You turn up, there's 1,000 people. Who do I speak to first? And you'll naturally speak to someone that's probably of your level. You're not really progressing. You make a good friendship, but there's 999 other people that you could be speaking to, but you're not, because you don't know who the most important people are to speak to.
Hmm.
So when we connect people to the industry, we want to be there with them so we can help go, that's the person you want to speak to over there. Make a beeline for that person. That's a great partner. Here's some context. That group of people, they're all from TikTok. Just trying to understand, when you're in those events, your time is money, and your time is not infinite, right? We've all got an expiration date. So you have to use it very, very carefully. And if you're just spending the whole night having a great conversation with someone that's just of your level and not moving you forward, that's not good business sense.
Mm.
The best business networkers out there are understanding the room. That, you know, like the first thing I say to people when you go to like an award ceremony is take a picture of the table plan.
Yeah, I always
That's
do that. I
key,
always do
absolutely
that.
key. Take a picture of the table plan, take a picture of all the names that are going to be there. Because your context now is, I've gone to an awards. Hey, I saw you at the awards. I was going to come to your table at the awards. I was at the Music Week Awards, whatever it might be. Your narrative is very different because you've got a starting point in your communication.
Mm.
And this is about understanding those little tricks. There's a great guy called Dale Carnegie who, you know, it's a really old book about how to win friends. And it's just up there, actually. It's a book that I give to every single artist I work with. Even though that book is 100 years old, I say to every single artist, read that book, make notes, really understand that book, because it talks about connection. It talks about how you communicate with people. It gives you little tips like when people start emails going, "Hi, Mark, hope you're well." Never do that. Like, it's an absolute no-no. Always end with "hope you're well." Always get to the point in that first paragraph. And Dale Carnegie talks about this. Works for me every single time. The conversion rate of those emails are much, much higher because an artist is in the business of sales. So your communication is important. You're selling your product to customers, but you're also selling it to suppliers and you're selling it to partners. And that's what those industry events are all about. So the fourth part really is understanding the industry, how to engage with the communities within the industry, how to speak to them, how to be at those events, and how to build up, you know, your kind of sales strategy with them. What's your story? What's your elevator pitch? It's no different to walking into the Dragon's Den.
Mm.
You have to present yourself very quickly. Why am I a credible partner? And you've probably got about 10 seconds to do that.
Yeah.
So it's really, so when, like, for example, this year we're sponsoring the Music Week Awards. So we'll bring some of our clients with us and they've got an amazing narrative. They bump into someone, we say, look, that person's important, that person's important, that person's important. At some point during the night, go and have a conversation with them. But you can start the conversation with, I'm on the table with Blinding Talent, who are a sponsor at the event. Hi, my name is,
Yeah.
right? Your credibility is suddenly gone from, I don't know you, to, all right, I'm already interested.
Yeah.
You know,
Absolutely.
it's those little kind of tricks that can
Little
just help an
nuggets.
artist go from not knowing anyone to having a lot more confidence in themselves and in their product and the fact they feel part of the industry. So that's the fourth part, is industry. And then the fifth corner, which frankly is the holy grail, sustainability. How do you make money as an artist? And that, it doesn't matter if that word is artist, business, vacuum cleaner, seller, right? It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
How do you make money? Well, the basic principles are understand your rights in terms of what you can make sort of mechanically through airplay and through sync and licensing. That's very hard to control, but make sure you're registered correctly. In the same way I'm registered with Companies House, you should be registered with, you know, BPI or PRS or
Right.
PPL, right?
Yeah.
It needs to be as standardized as that. You're a business, you need to set yourself up on here, 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 and here, right? At some point, you might become VAT registered. At some point, you might need to set yourself up as a limited company, right? Understanding your business. Then when we go from that, we get to the fun bit, which is if you've actually created an audience through great music, great marketing, great mental fitness, making the right industry connects, now you can start monetizing them. And this is all about data, really. How are you collecting data? What is your marketing funnel? What is your actual user journey? Every great business has a user journey from I don't know you to I'm a returning customer. And a super fan is just a returning customer. That's all they are. A super fan is just a returning customer.
Yeah.
And so I can look at that quite confidently as a business owner now because I've done this for years and I've been fairly successful so far, you know, but I want more, like most people do. I want to grow bigger and have more influence and I want to be even better at what we do. And I think artists are on that same journey. But if they just understand, you've got to take someone from I don't know you to a returning customer. There's a few points along that journey, right? There's the awareness stage, there's the interest stage, consideration, conversion, and of course, returning customer. Once you understand how that all works in your context, in your business, that's scalable. And so sustainability really should be the sum of all parts. You get those first four areas right, the fifth part should look after itself. And if it's not looking after itself, there'll be good reasons for that. And we can unpick that. And so that's artist development. Now, I know it sounds more like business coaching, which I suppose it is to some
Yeah.
degree, but it's a framework. And I think this is where artists get it wrong, is
Yeah.
they live in this little silo of I release music on DistroKid and I just do some shows, and then they just hope an A&R, whoever that is, because there's lots of people using the term A&R and they're actually salespeople, which is stupid. But they hope that an A&R is going to see them and then sign them to a record label.
Mm.
Full disclosure, that does not happen ever anymore. Every record label is signing an artist based on data. There is no gut anymore. Forget that. Forget that illusion that someone's going to see you in a little pokey club in Aberystwyth and they're going to go there on a Wednesday night in an anorak sitting at the back. Yes, 25 years ago, Gordon, that might have been true. Yeah,
Yeah.
because they didn't have data. They
No,
didn't have social media platforms where they could sort of look at it and go, right, okay, they've got X amount of followers here, X amount of streams here, or I can see they've got a community here on Patreon or whatever. They're making a couple of thousand from that. They couldn't do that. They had to listen to the music and go, let's take a chance on that. I really like it.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Does not happen now.
Yeah, I mean, where do you see, just to sort of conclude, and that's an amazing strategy that you've got in place there, and it's that whole rinse and repeat process, which is clearly working for you. Where do you see the future of independent artists? What are the sort of trends that and particularly with maybe the concern of AI as well, and owning copyright? What's your sort of short summary of what that's going to look like?
Oh, yeah. Short summaries, as you can tell, I'm not very good at, but
Short.
I'll try and be short. I think I am not in any way against AI. I think technology, if you look at my career, technology has been a big precursor to fundamental and positive change in the music
Yeah.
industry. I think AI will actually help with rights. I don't think it will hinder rights. I think it's actually going to make the whole publishing and licensing area more accountable, more efficient, and I think artists will get paid more. I actually think it's a good thing. I think AI will facilitate creativity and democratize the industry for independent artists.
Right.
So it's a good thing. I think it will assist them in terms of being more efficient and more consistent on social media. So it's a good thing. I think it will revolutionize the way that we consume media. I think it will be far more targeted, but I think it will lend itself more to a new form of virality, which is far more targeted. The idea that you blow up, but you blow up to the wrong audiences, that is still a thing. And I
Mm.
think what will happen is you'll blow up to the right audiences. That's going to be a really interesting switch.
Yeah.
Um, Other things I would say in terms of trends, I think there are platforms out there like Weverse, which are, is a super fan platform. I think having a platform where you can control your community and you can deliver to them very unique experiences, whether it be video or live or DMs, and communicate in an efficient way. So again, this is no different to WhatsApp business in some ways. How do you communicate quickly to your customers? That's what Weverse are doing. It's like a super CRM. That's
Mm.
really what it is. It's like a sales model, but they call it Weverse. It's owned by Hybe, HYBE.
Mm.
Really fantastic platform. We use it a little bit, but there are other platforms out there, just to be clear. We're not in any way sponsored or endorsed by them, but I think the Superfan platform is a tech solution that a lot of people are looking into because there's a lot of money to be made if someone can solve that problem. I
Mm.
think Versa, they've just Universal have just taken a stake in them as well. So
Interesting.
clearly they're thinking about that. Universal have also recently taken all of their music off of TikTok. So we're in a little bit of a, let's just say, transitional moment.
Mm.
TikTok music is still penned to launch globally in June this year. Will it launch without Universal Music on it? Don't know. Have platforms launched without Universal Music on it before? Yeah, there was a platform a little while ago that done this called Spotify. Done all right in the end, didn't it? So who knows how this is going to play out? But
Mm.
and also you've got the American thing with fan bites at the moment where they're obviously looking to purchase fan bites, and certain states have blocked TikTok. I mean, TikTok isn't even available in India, for example. So it's not like it's the only place
Yeah,
in the world
that,
it's
why is
banned.
that? Well, I read that a little while ago. Why is it not available in India?
Depends how deep you want to get into the political side of it. I think because India is such a high producer of goods across the world, they
Hmm.
probably wouldn't want to introduce a platform that is so distracting because I think it could have an economical effect globally. That's just I don't know if that's true. I don't.
TikTokization. I saw something about TikTokization the other day. It's almost like a term for addictive behavior. So
Yeah,
you're right.
well,
You're
they probably wouldn't be as good at their jobs. I think like most people would be
right.
distracted by the screens, and
Yeah.
I think India is such a big exporter of goods that that might
Yeah.
be a problem there. It
Absolutely.
might also be a control thing. It might also be it could be a number of different things. Like you and I are mere mortals in this world. We can only kind of guess and suggest why that might be the case.
Yeah.
But certainly, the future is very very bright for independent artists, and I think if they utilize tech, become early adopters. My entire career and my success in my career has been based on me being curious and early adopter. And I think if all artists can be that, they have an opportunity to be successful and have their and build their own influence because that's where it comes from,
Hmm.
right? Influence comes from audience. Audiences are often found in those slightly small micro communities, certainly initially. Going viral on TikTok 4 years ago was a lot easier because there was just 500,000 users. Going viral on TikTok now is an awful lot harder because there's 1.5 billion. That's the thing here that we've got to deal with. And then the next iteration, and I'll leave you with this lovely forecast. And I'm very good at this, I like to think. I could be wrong, right? But I was speaking to a tech guy very recently, a very, very senior tech guy, and he said the next iteration of social media will be live, and it will be live. So the idea of a
Live
post,
stream.
yeah, so the idea of posting onto a feed, posting onto a story,
Hmm.
gone.
No.
You will only ever go live.
Yeah.
And that's really interesting because that's getting close to the Truman Show. It's getting closer to some of those things we were introduced to many years ago of a possibility of a potential future. And increasingly people are saying that iRobot is looking more like a documentary now rather than a Will Smith film. But I
Yeah,
think
no,
certainly
I
where
think
we're
you're right.
going,
Well, it's already happening in some parts of the world, in Asia in particular, long periods of live streaming. So I absolutely agree with you. Well, look, Mark, it's been an absolute pleasure talking with you today and hearing about your illustrious career and all the very best for what you're doing with these artists. It sounds really inspiring, and obviously I've known you and met you before, so I love the sort of work that you do. How can people find out more about you?
yeah, I think the easiest thing to do would be to go to the website, blindingtalent.com. And on there, you can see a number of things that we do, a number of services that we offer. There's also a slight more, another sort of version of the page about what I do, my background, some of the history of like the panels that I've judged on and things like just if you want even more information about me, I'm sure you don't after this one. But yeah, I think go in there and if you want to find a bit more, I mean, do check out our TikTok. I do awful lot of videos on TikTok talking about the music business. Instagram, we post a lot of our success on there. So I would just go and have a look at the Blinding Talent system, and you can kind of get a touch of what we do. Instagram is Blinding Talent Insta, and everything else is at Blinding Talent.
Right. All right, Mark Adams, thank you so much for joining us on the Influence Global podcast.
Brilliant. Thanks, Gordon.